She came back from her business trip 2 days early and froze in the doorway, hearing her husband's strange phone conversation. The moment she realized who he was talking to, her whole world shattered. But what she did next shocked everyone. Dear friends of our channel, we're always curious to know how far our stories travel and whose hearts they touch across this vast world. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Every message from you is a thread that weaves us all together into one shared tapestry of human stories and emotions. And now, our story begins. The air smelled like early sapling, that fleeting moment when the sun is just starting to show its strength, and the snow reluctantly gives way, melting into clear puddles on the asphalt. Veronica Pierce stood by the window, watching the wind play with the bare tree branches in the yard. There was still a week until Charlie's birthday, and just thinking about it filled her heart with warmth. 11 years, she whispered, flipping through the guest list. It felt like only yesterday she was holding that tiny bundle against her chest for the first time, barely daring to breathe from the happiness. And now her son was talking about chess openings and asking for a radio building kit for his birthday. The Pierce family lived in the city center, in an old building with high ceilings and wide windowsills. The walls were covered with paintings, not expensive ones, but watercolors Veronica had painted herself back in her student days. Bookshelves packed with classics and modern fiction, a vintage grandfather clock from her grandmother, a cozy couch with worn armrests, everything in the apartment radiated calm, a sense of order and comfort that Veronica deeply cherished. A soft clink came from the next room. Charlie had made another move on the chessboard. He played alone when he was nervous or lost in thought. Veronica smiled. Her son, delicate on the outside, but with a quiet strength inside. Just like his father. The memory of Martin washed over her with tenderness. 18 years together, almost half her life. She remembered their first meeting like it was yesterday, the university library, the scent of old books, her hand reaching for a book of poetry, only to be beaten by another hand. Their fingers touched, and she looked up, direct gaze, a slight smirk, broad volleyball player's shoulders. "Do you like poetry?" he asked, still holding the book. "I don't just like it, I live by it," she replied with a spark. That was their first conversation. Then came long walks along the river, heated debates about literature, and his surprise calls in the middle of the night. "Look out the window, I brought you cherries." He won her over with his unpredictability, his boldness, and that quiet confidence that made everything around him feel warmer. Their wedding was modest. They were students, what kind of lavish celebration could there be? But Veronica remembered every second of that day, her trembling hands as they exchanged rings, her grandmother's whispered advice, the key to a strong marriage is patience and wisdom. Then came the years of waiting for a child. Endless doctor visits, tests, treatments. The first 2 miscarriages left her heart frozen in grief. Month after month, hope, followed by heartbreak. She and Martin didn't talk about it, but they both felt it, the invisible wall growing between them, built from unspoken fears and quiet blame. Just when they were about to give up, when Veronica was ready to talk to Martin about adoption, a miracle happened. She remembered holding the pregnancy test with shaking hands, unable to believe her eyes. And when she told Martin, he sank to his knees, pressed his face to her still flat stomach, and she felt his tears on her skin. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Veronica spent most of it on bed rest, and the last 2 months in the hospital. Martin visited every day, bringing books and fruit, sitting beside her and holding her hand. "We've got this, Veronica," he would say. "You'll see, we're going to have the most amazing kid in the world." And he was right. Charlie was born at noon, crying loud and strong. Veronica, exhausted after hours of labor, burst into tears of joy when they laid that tiny, warm bundle with peach fuzz hair on her chest. After Charlie was born, she dove completely into motherhood. She gave up her position as deputy head at the school, keeping only a few private lessons and occasional curriculum work. Martin supported her, even though things were tight at first. But his career soon took off. He went from a junior manager to commercial director at the construction company Urban Axis, and started traveling more, especially to the company's northern branch. Veronica got used to him being away. 3 or 4 days a week, it was just her and Charlie, and that became their normal. She learned not to miss him too much, filling her time with Charlie's needs, reading, and the occasional meet-up with friends. After all, she told herself as she fell asleep alone, it was all for the family's future. That Tuesday, Veronica was getting ready for one of her rare business trips, a 2-day education conference in a nearby city. She sometimes worked as a consultant, designing programs for private schools. Her suitcase was nearly packed, the tickets bought, when the phone rang. "Good afternoon, Veronica," said the organizer's apologetic voice. "We've had a last-minute issue. Our sponsor pulled out, so the event's been cancelled. We're very sorry." Her first reaction was irritation, all that time spent preparing her presentation, the tickets already bought. But then it hit her, Martin was supposed to return from his trip tomorrow, and now, instead of missing each other, they'd get to spend 2 whole days together. A rare luxury in their lives. "I'll surprise him," Veronica decided, dialing her husband's number. His phone was off, not surprising. Martin was often on job sites during his business trips, places with no signal. She decided to cook his favorite dish, duck with apples. The last time she made it was for Christmas the year before. Charlie was over at a friend's house today, prepping for the math Olympiad, so she had the whole afternoon to herself. She went to the market, bought everything she needed, and even stopped by the bakery for his favorite tiramisu. On the way home, Veronica realized she hadn't felt this kind of anticipation in a long time. Their relationship had settled in recent years, quieter, steadier, without the old bursts of passion, but full of deep understanding and respect. "Maybe we should take a trip, just the 2 of us," she thought as she climbed the stairs. "San Francisco for the weekend, maybe, when Charlie's away at math camp." She unlocked the door and froze on the threshold. There they were, his shoes. The stylish, expensive pair she gave him for his last birthday. From the bedroom came Martin's voice, low and muffled. Her heart skipped. He was home early. Maybe he wanted to surprise her too. She opened her mouth to call out to him, but something in his voice made her stop. "Of course I miss you, Polly," he said softly, almost tenderly. "But you know I can't just walk away from everything." "Yes, I know what I promised. Look, let's meet tomorrow and I'll explain everything. Of course I love you too." The floor dropped out from under her. Veronica leaned against the wall as the room spun around her. A lump rose in her throat, heavy with nausea. She clamped a hand over her mouth, afraid to make a sound. Polly. The name hit her like a hammer. Not once in all these years had she ever doubted him. Sure, she'd heard of workplace affairs, midlife crises, but those things happen to other people. Not her Martin. Not their family. Her first instinct was to storm into the bedroom and unleash everything, her pain, her rage, her betrayal. But something stopped her. Maybe it was reason. Maybe it was self-preservation. Breathe, she told herself. Think. What will a meltdown get you? Nothing but the usual excuses. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. It'll never happen again. Her mind kicked into survival mode, separating from the storm inside her. She needed information. Who was this woman? How long had it been going on? How serious was it? And most importantly, what should she do next? Quietly, barely breathing, Veronica set the grocery bags down on the floor. Then, on tiptoe, she slipped out of the apartment, gently pulling the door closed behind her. Out on the landing, she finally exhaled, swallowing back tears. Pull yourself together, she told herself. You're stronger than you think. A minute later, she was back in front of the door. She took a deep breath, then another, and smoothed her expression into something neutral. Then she unlocked the door again, this time, loudly. "Martin. You're home," she called, hanging up her coat. What a surprise. She heard quick footsteps from the bedroom. Martin appeared in the doorway. For a second, his face froze, an unreadable look, maybe irritation. But it was quickly replaced by a smile. "Veronica, I thought you were at the conference." "It got cancelled last minute," she said, walking over and kissing his cheek, doing her best not to recoil at the familiar scent of his aftershave, which suddenly felt foreign, almost hostile. "And you? I thought you were coming back tomorrow." "We wrapped things up early," he shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Figured I'd just come home instead of staying the night." "Liar," pounded in her head. "You were never on a trip. You were with her." "I bought a duck," Veronica said, heading to the kitchen. "Was planning to surprise you tomorrow, but since you're here." "Perfect," he smiled, that same smile that used to make her heart race. "I haven't had your duck in ages." The whole evening felt like a bad dream. They had dinner, chatted about nothing in particular, Charlie's upcoming birthday, summer plans. Veronica could hear her own voice from a distance, calm and friendly. She watched her hands pour wine, saw herself smiling at Martin's jokes. But it all felt like it was happening to someone else. The real Veronica was splintering inside from pain and humiliation, choking on betrayal and rage, paralyzed by fear of what the future might hold. When they went to bed, Martin fell asleep almost instantly, peacefully, like a child. The way only someone with either a spotless conscience or no conscience at all could sleep. Veronica lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how strange life was. That morning she had a solid foundation, confidence in tomorrow, a past to be proud of, and a future she was building. And now? What was she supposed to do with this truth? How could she go on? To forgive and forget would mean betraying herself. But walking away would destroy Charlie's world, strip him of the family she had fought so hard to keep whole. Outside, the spring night settled in. The wind picked up, flinging drops of rain against the glass. Veronica looked at the man sleeping beside her, so familiar and yet now a stranger, and knew she had to make a decision. Not now, not in the heat of emotion, but eventually. She would have to choose. She remembered her grandmother's words, "Life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. Every trial is a chance to grow stronger." "We'll see, Grandma," Veronica thought, feeling a hot tear roll down her cheek. "We'll see just how strong I really am." Morning came suddenly. Veronica hadn't noticed when she finally slipped into a heavy sleep just before dawn. Gray light leaked in through the curtains, and someone was already making noise in the kitchen. Martin was cooking breakfast, a rare gesture from him that once might have made her smile. Now, every move he made felt staged, like an actor playing to a grateful audience. "Get up. Get it together," she told herself, as a dull ache tightened around her temples, the familiar migraine she hadn't felt in years. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and eggs with tomatoes. Charlie was already at the table, blinking sleepily and mumbling math formulas. He had a test today. "Morning, sleepyhead," Martin kissed the top of her head. Veronica barely stopped herself from pulling away. "Morning," she managed, forcing a smile that felt stiff. "Thanks for breakfast." "Mama, you look kinda pale." Charlie looked up at her with concern. The same green eyes as his father's. "Are you sick?" "Just didn't sleep well, sweetheart," she said, ruffling his hair. "I'm okay." Martin checked the time. "I've got to run." "Meeting at 9, he said, finishing his coffee. "I'll be late tonight, meeting with suppliers." "Suppliers, right." Polly, Veronica thought, but only nodded. "Sure. Have a good day." When the door closed behind her husband and son, she slowly sank into a chair and buried her face in her hands. The room began to spin again, nausea rising in her throat. To ground herself, she started counting, 1, 2, 3. An old childhood trick for when the world felt too heavy to carry. The next 3 days blurred into one long, agonizing performance. She made dinners, checked Charlie's homework, talked to Martin about party plans, all with a frozen smile that felt like it might crack at any moment, like porcelain under pressure. At night, she lay awake, replaying their life together, searching for signs she might have missed. The business trips after which he returned relaxed and glowing. The new cologne he started wearing 6 months ago. His sudden interest in contemporary novels he never used to care for. The slightly more expensive gifts on holidays, like hush money for a betrayal she didn't know she was being paid for. How could she have been so blind? Or had she just refused to see? Caught up in caring for her son, the house, and her part-time work, Veronica hadn't even noticed when her husband slipped away into another life, a life that included this woman, Polly. Just thinking her name hurt, like pressing a tongue against an open wound. On the 4th day, the migraine got so bad Veronica couldn't even get out of bed. Martin had left before dawn, another business trip to the northern branch for 2 days. Now she understood the real reason behind all those trips. Charlie had left for school on his own, peeking into her room with a worried look before he left. "Should I call a doctor, Mom?" he asked, his sweet concern only deepening the ache inside her. "No, honey, it's just a migraine. It'll pass by evening," she said, trying to smile. "Good luck at the Olympiad." Around noon, when the pain finally eased a little, Veronica got up, made herself a strong cup of tea, and decided to take out the trash. Some fresh air might help. On the stair landing, she bumped into her neighbor, William Welch. A retired military doctor, he lived 1 floor up. They occasionally exchanged pleasantries, but never more than that. "Veronica, dear, you look awful," he said, looking at her closely. "Is something wrong?" She meant to respond with something polite, but suddenly the weight she'd been carrying cracked open. The tears came in a rush, and she buried her face in her hands, sobbing right there in the stairwell. William didn't miss a beat. He gently took her by the elbow and led her to his apartment. In the small kitchen that smelled of herbs and cinnamon, he sat her down and quietly set a mug of mint tea in front of her. He waited until she calmed down a little, then finally spoke. "I won't ask what happened unless you want to tell me. But sometimes sharing the pain helps make it bearable." And so she told him, about the overheard phone call, the sleepless nights, her fear for Charlie's future, and the agony of not knowing what to do. William listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally, as if to say, "You have every right to feel hurt and furious." When she finished, he stayed silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the old maple in the yard. Then he sighed and spoke quietly, almost to himself. "You know, Veronica, something similar happened to me when I was younger. Only I was the one in your husband's place," he said with a grim smile. "Frances, my late wife, found out I was having an affair with a nurse at the hospital. She packed her bags, left for her mother's. I thought it was over. But a week later she came back. Told me, you choose, either we rebuild this marriage from scratch, or we get divorced. I chose the marriage. And you know what? We had 40 years together. It wasn't always easy, but it was solid. We raised 2 sons. Now I have 4 grandkids." He paused for a moment, then added. "I'm not saying you should forgive or forget. That's your decision. But don't rush. Breaking a family is easy. Rebuilding it, especially when there's a child involved, is not." "How did you do it?" Veronica asked quietly. "How did she go on living with you after that?" "Honesty. We stopped lying to each other, and to ourselves. And patience. Trust doesn't come back overnight. But if there's love," he shrugged, "we both had that. It helped." As Veronica walked back home, she felt an odd sense of calm. William's words hadn't solved anything, but they gave her a small spark of hope. Maybe a path forward still existed. But before anything else, she needed one more conversation. Melanie, her best friend since college, agreed to meet that same evening. They chose a small cafe on the edge of town, far from familiar faces and places. "You're scaring me," Melanie said once they'd settled into a corner booth. "What's going on? Is Charlie okay?" "It's not him," Veronica replied softly. "It's me. Martin's cheating on me." She told Melanie everything, briefly, plainly, without tears. Strangely, saying it out loud for the second time dulled the pain a little, made it feel more like a fact than a wound. Melanie listened, drumming her fingers on the table, a habit that always betrayed her anger. "That bastard," she finally hissed. Classic midlife crisis. They all need some young girl to reassure them they're still men. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know," Veronica answered honestly. "What would you do in my place?" "I'd throw him out and take everything I could in court," Melanie said without hesitation. "You gave him the best years of your life. You had his child. And this is what he gives you in return." She didn't finish, just waved it off in disgust. "But what about our family? What about Charlie?" "He should have thought about that before getting cozy with some 20-something, Melanie said, taking a sip of wine. "Look, Veronica, I get it, you're torn. But look at me. I divorced Taylor 5 years ago, and it was the best decision I ever made. You used to say the loneliness sometimes gets to you." "It does," Melanie admitted. "And yeah, money can be tight. And raising a teenage daughter without a father figure is no picnic. But you know what? I wake up every day and I belong to myself. No lies. No betrayal. That's worth a hell of a lot." They talked until the cafe closed. Melanie pushed, Veronica hesitated. Two different perspectives. Two different lives. Two possible roads. In the end, they parted without reaching a conclusion. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back," Melanie said as they hugged goodbye. "But first, find out the whole truth. You deserve to know exactly what you're dealing with." Those words stuck with Veronica. How could she make a decision without the full picture? How serious was Martin's relationship with this woman? How long had it been going on? Were they making plans for the future? The next day, she called Melanie's sister, April, who worked in cybersecurity. After a bit of hesitation, Veronica shared her situation. "I get why you want to know," April said carefully. "But there's a legal issue. Personal messages are protected by law. And infidelity isn't a violation of my rights?" Veronica asked bitterly. "Morally, absolutely. Legally, it's a gray area," April replied after a pause. "Look, I can help. There are programs you can install on his phone. They'll send message copies to your email. But you'll need physical access to the phone for at least 30 minutes. "I'll find a way," Veronica said firmly. Her chance came 2 days later. Martin got back from his trip late at night. After a shower, he went straight to bed. His phone was still in the pocket of his jacket, an unusual slip for him. Veronica waited until his breathing turned steady, then tiptoed into the hallway. The phone was locked, but she knew the code, their wedding date. The irony was unbearable. With trembling hands, she installed the program using April's instructions, then placed the phone back exactly where it was and slid quietly into bed. The next morning, after seeing her husband and son off, she opened her email. Her head spun from the flood of data, hundreds of messages, photos, voice recordings. She began going through them in order, and with each one, it felt like ice spread deeper into her chest. The affair had been going on for nearly 3 years. 3 years. This wasn't a fling. This was a second life. Trips abroad. Weekend getaways in country hotels. Future plans. Polly turned out to be a marketing specialist at the Northern Branch. 28. 12 years younger than Veronica. Beautiful, judging by the photos on social media. Polished, confident, with a bright career ahead of her. Everything Veronica had given up for the sake of family. With shaking hands, she scrolled through receipts from jewelry stores, restaurant bills, rent payments. Rent, for their apartment. A cozy little hideaway. All this time, while she cut corners to afford Charlie's tutoring, her husband was supporting his mistress with their family's money. Veronica closed the laptop and walked to the window. Something inside her had cracked, like thin ice under pressure. The despair had cleared, replaced by something colder, sharper, and more focused. No, William, she thought, staring out at the maple tree in the courtyard. I won't rush into any decision. But I'm also not going to sit around quietly while he finishes playing his little game. This time, we're playing by my rules. A plan started forming in her mind. Not a dramatic scene. Not a screaming match. Not even revenge in the usual sense. Something more subtle. More elegant. She remembered Charlie explaining chess strategies to her. You have to think a few moves ahead, Mom. And sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the game. Well then. She was ready to make her first move. She had access to his messages now, that gave her an edge. She had a name for the other woman, that gave her a target. And the fury boiling inside her gave her power. We'll see who outplays who, Polly, Veronica whispered, her lips curling into a cold smile. The night was clear, dotted with sharp stars and a thin crescent moon. Veronica sat in the kitchen window wrapped in an old plaid blanket. In front of her lay a stack of printed messages between Martin and Polly. Each word, each casual phrase sent a dull ache through her chest, but she forced herself to read them over and over, breaking them down like a secret code. Sweetheart, everything's going to change soon. You know that. Martin. I'm tired of waiting. I don't need promises. You know I can't just walk away overnight. Sometimes I think you'll never leave her. Bit by bit, the puzzle began to take shape. There was tension in their relationship. Polly was pushing for answers. Martin was stalling, hiding behind his responsibilities as a father. That was something Veronica could use, a thread she could pull. By the time morning light crept in, Veronica was still sitting by the window. But her back was straight, her eyes steady. Something had shifted. She had shed the skin of a victim and stepped into a new role, the strategist, the director of her own life. No one gets to make me an extra in my own story, she thought, watching the street begin to stir. She opened a drawer and pulled out a leather-bound notebook, a gift from her colleagues on Teacher's Day. She'd been saving it for something special. She turned to the first page and wrote in bold, steady handwriting. Action plan. After a moment's thought, she added. Goal, not just to end the affair, but to make her walk away on her own. That mattered. This wasn't about yelling or public scenes. That would be too easy to dismiss as the outburst of a bitter, jealous wife. No. This had to be smarter, cleaner, more effective. Just then, Charlie walked into the kitchen, yawning. Mom, why are you up so early? He rubbed his eyes and reached for juice from the fridge. Veronica snapped the notebook shut in one quick motion and smiled, genuinely, as she looked at her sleepy son, his hair sticking up in every direction. Prepping for a meeting with a private school principal, she lied, a flash of guilt pricking her. And why are you up? It's Saturday. Chess tournament, remember? Charlie gave her a half-annoyed look. I told you yesterday. Oh, right, of course. Veronica rubbed her temples. How could she forget? Sorry, sweetheart. It's just been a crazy few days. After sending Charlie off to his tournament, Martin too busy, as usual, with work, Veronica returned to her makeshift command center. Step 1 was to keep everything looking normal. She had to blend routine with precision. Breakfasts, lunches, homework checks, Charlie's tutors, Every detail had to stay exactly the same. That way, no one would suspect a thing. The notebook began to fill with her first notes: Martin's schedule, his habits, the patterns of his so-called business trips. She listed every meeting he'd had with Polly over the past 6 months, searching for a rhythm. It turned out they met most often on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when Charlie had extra classes and got home late. Next came the psychological profile of her rival. Veronica combed through every social media account Polly had, even found a few marketing articles she'd written for an industry journal. The picture that emerged was intriguing: a smart, ambitious young woman from a modest background, determined to make her way in the business world. No father, her parents divorced when she was 5. A tense relationship with her mother. Class president in college, graduated with honors. For Polly, her career wasn't just a job, it was a way to prove her worth. What fascinated Veronica most was the subtext in Polly's messages to Martin. Behind all the flirtation and heated declarations, there was something else: fear. Polly was clearly afraid of being left alone. Afraid that time was slipping away. That she was wasting years on a man who might never leave his family. That was it. That was the weak spot. Not jealousy. Not money. Not even passion. But the fear of lost time. The fear of hitting 30 alone, without the stability she'd craved since childhood with a single mother. Lost in her thoughts, Veronica didn't even hear Charlie come home, excited, glowing. "Mom! I got second place," he burst into the room, waving a certificate. "Can you believe it? I almost beat Massey from the math school." "That's amazing, sweetheart." Veronica pulled him into a hug, and for a moment, all her heavy thoughts melted away in the warmth of his joy. "Tell me everything." Charlie launched into a detailed breakdown of the matches, and Veronica realized she barely understood the game her son loved so much. "Hey," she said suddenly, surprising even herself, "how about you teach me to play chess? For real, not just moving pieces around." His eyes lit up with surprise and excitement. "Really? You want to?" He rushed to the cabinet for the chessboard. "I've been dying to play with you." For the next hour, Veronica listened intently as he explained the value of the pieces, the importance of controlling the center, and the logic behind different strategies. "The most important thing, Mom," Charlie said seriously, "is thinking a few moves ahead. You can't just focus on what's happening now, you have to see what's coming next." "And sacrifices?" she asked. "I've heard that sometimes you have to give up pieces in chess." "Yeah," Charlie nodded. "That's called a gambit. You give up something valuable to gain a better position. Like giving up a pawn to win tempo, or even the queen if it leads to checkmate. The key is knowing why you're making the sacrifice." Veronica stared at the board, thoughtful. A sacrifice to win the game. Would Charlie himself become a casualty if her plan went wrong? If Martin found out and left for good, what would happen to this boy, who looked so much like his father and still needed him so much? That evening, after Charlie had gone to bed and Martin was out, meeting with suppliers, again, Veronica took out an old brooch from her jewelry box, her grandmother's heirloom. A silver branch with tiny pearls instead of berries, crafted in the 1950s. Her grandmother had lived through the war. Her husband returned from the front with a scar in his lung, and another woman in his heart. He'd fallen for a nurse. But her grandmother hadn't given up. "I never forced him to stay," she once told Veronica. "I just loved him so deeply and patiently that he chose to stay on his own." That brooch had been his gift after the affair ended. A symbol of loyalty and forgiveness. Her grandmother had worn it always, on holidays and ordinary days, until the day she died. Veronica ran her fingers over the cool metal. Was this marriage worth fighting for? Would it be easier to let go, to start over? Now that the initial shock had worn off, she could think about it with some distance. A phone call interrupted her thoughts. The screen lit up. "Mom." "Hi, Veronica," sweetheart." Frances's voice was warm, but carried a note of concern. "How are you? Is Charlie feeling okay?" "We're fine, Mom," Veronica answered, trying to sound normal. "Charlie took second place in a chess tournament. Martin's working a lot, as usual. How about you?" "Oh, my blood pressure's acting up, but nothing I can't handle," her mother replied, then paused. "Are you sure you're okay? Your voice sounds different." Veronica bit her lip. She wanted so badly to let it all out, to hear advice, to feel supported. But her mother was unwell, heart problems. Why burden her with more? "Just tired, that's all," she lied. "You know, spring fatigue, vitamin deficiency." "Come visit this weekend," her mother offered. "I'll bake a pie, you'll get some fresh air. Maybe Martin can finally take a break from all his work." "I don't know, Mom," Veronica sighed. "He's swamped with an important project right now." After the call, she returned to her notebook. Was it really worth saving the marriage at any cost? For Charlie? Out of habit? Out of fear of starting over? Those questions still had no clear answers. But one thing Veronica knew for sure, no one else would decide her future. If the marriage ended, it would be her choice, not the result of some affair with a younger coworker. Before bed, she checked the intercepted emails again and came across a recent exchange. "Polly, hey, how about we go to the lake next weekend? There's a new campground there, super cozy. You said your wife and son are going to that math competition in another city." "Martin, sounds perfect, sunshine. I'll book a cabin by the water, you'll love it. I've been wanting to spend time with you, just us, no city noise." Veronica reread the message several times. The competition, of course. Charlie had been invited to a regional math Olympiad, but she hadn't yet decided if she'd go with him. Meanwhile, Martin was already making plans to use her absence. This was the perfect opportunity to make her first tactical move. The next morning at breakfast, she casually brought it up. "Martin, I've been thinking about next weekend. Charlie has that math competition, and I could go with him, but," she paused, watching him closely. Martin looked up from his phone, and for a brief second, she saw something like hope in his eyes. "But you know," she continued smoothly, "I ran into Christopher Richardson yesterday." She said the name deliberately, Christopher, the deputy CEO at Martin's company. "He invited us out to his country place. Haywood and his wife will be there too, you know, he's on the board now. I told him we'd be happy to join." Martin's face fell. "Next weekend," he repeated. "But I already scheduled an important meeting with suppliers." "Really?" Veronica feigned disappointment. "That's too bad. Christopher was very clear, he especially wants to see you. He mentioned something about a new project and team expansion." She sighed. "Well, I'll let him know you're busy." She watched the storm behind Martin's eyes, a tug-of-war. Christopher Richardson was someone whose opinion carried serious weight for his career. Skipping that kind of informal networking could cost him dearly. "No, wait," Martin said finally. "I'll reschedule the meeting. Of course we'll go." "You're sure?" Veronica asked, her voice full of exaggerated concern. "I know how important your work is. I don't want you to give anything up on my account." "It's fine," he said with a smile, though she saw the tightness in his jaw. "Family comes first." In that moment, Veronica felt something she hadn't in days, satisfaction. Not revenge, but control. For the first time, she wasn't just reacting. She was taking back power. That night, after Charlie had gone to bed, she heard Martin on the balcony, speaking into the phone in a low, tense voice. "Polly, listen, I can't cancel, it's important for my career." "No, I'm not making excuses." "Yes, I remember what I promised. We'll go another time, I swear." After hanging up, Martin stood for a long time, staring out at the night sky. And for the first time in these awful days, Veronica felt something close to pity. He looked lost, trapped between two worlds, unable to be fully honest in either. But pity didn't stop her. A new line appeared in her notebook: Move 1, weekend in the country. Outcome, successful. Next move. It was a small victory, the first in her quiet war. But Veronica knew the real battle was still ahead. The hardest part would be the decision waiting deep inside her own heart. She closed the notebook, glanced at a family photo on the dresser, last year's vacation, the three of them, sun-kissed and smiling, and whispered. Queen's Gambit, Martin. Let's see how you handle it. Polly Langford sat by the window of her one-bedroom apartment, watching raindrops draw patterns across the glass. The rented flat on the city's edge, clean, bright, impersonal, was the only place that felt truly hers. No co-workers, no mother, no friends knew this address. Only Martin. Absent-mindedly, she traced an invisible path through the fogged-up window. Sometimes it felt like her entire life was a long road from point A to point B, where point A was the humiliation of growing up with a single mother, and point B was still out of focus, but desperately longed for, respect, financial security, stability. A life where she didn't have to count every cent until payday. A life where she could finally plan instead of survive. On the coffee table sat a fresh issue of a business magazine, her laptop with a half-finished presentation for tomorrow's meeting, and a half-empty cup of cold coffee. Polly had been working as a marketing specialist at the northern branch of Urban Axis for 2 years, since finishing her master's. The job was a launch pad, nothing more. Her real ambition stretched far beyond. Her own agency. Major contracts. Industry recognition. And then Martin appeared. They met at an off-site company seminar. Polly was giving a presentation on a new marketing strategy, confident, numbers-backed, sharp. She caught the gaze of the commercial director, not the patronizing look most older men gave young women, but something else. Calculated. Curious. Professional. After her talk, he approached her himself, tall, a touch of gray at his temples, moving with the certainty of someone used to making decisions. Langford, right? Interesting thoughts on targeting niche segments. Got time to discuss the details? Of course she did. The discussion lasted well into the evening, drifted into dinner at the hotel restaurant, and then. She hadn't planned on any of it, truly, she hadn't. But there was something between them from the start, an unspoken pull, chemistry that didn't care about logic. Polly found out he was married before anything happened. He hadn't hidden it, wedding ring on his hand, casual mentions of a son. She hadn't meant to become the other woman. It went against her values, her pride, her carefully laid out life plan. But I've never been this happy. My wife and I, we've just been living like roommates for years, staying together for our son. I'll fix this. I just need time. The usual lines. The classic excuses. And Polly was smart enough to know exactly what they were worth. And yet, she believed him. Not so much his words, but the feeling behind them. For the first time, she met a man who saw her as more than a pretty face or a convenient partner. He respected her intelligence, encouraged her ambitions, gave advice, connected her with the right people. Then came the trips together. The long evenings talking about everything under the sun. The way he listened. The way he made her feel like her opinions mattered. Few men look at a woman like that, as if every word she says carries weight. I love you, Polly. We will be together. I promise. And she believed him, over and over again. She turned down a job interview in New York, because taking it would mean saying goodbye. She stopped dating other men. Drifted apart from her best friend, who had gotten married and had a child. 30 was just around the corner, and she was still clinging to a future that grew blurrier with every passing year. Sometimes she felt like she was split in two. By day, she was Polly Langford, successful marketing professional, all charts and strategy meetings. By night and on weekends, she was someone else, playing the ridiculous role of the other woman, waiting for calls, making up excuses to her mother for why she couldn't come home for the holidays. And now, another last-minute cancellation. She had been so looking forward to this weekend at the lake. She'd booked the cabin herself, prepared a surprise, a letter proposing they open a marketing agency together. She was ready for a serious conversation. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Polly, sweetheart, how are you?" Her mother, Roberta, sounded worried. "You didn't sound too happy last time we talked." "I'm fine, Mom," Polly swallowed hard. "Just tired. Work's been a lot lately." "Work is work, but it's time to think about your personal life," her mother sighed, slipping into her usual concern. "You're almost 30, and you've got no husband, no kids. All your friends are married by now. Mom, can we not do this right now?" Polly's frustration broke through the fatigue. "I have my own life." "What life?" her mother said softly, the pain in her voice real. "Just work. I can see it, you're not happy. Sure, the career, the apartment, but there's sadness in your eyes." Polly closed her eyes. Her mother, as simple as she could be, always saw straight through her. Maybe because she'd lived through a similar story, fell in love with a married man, got pregnant, waited for him to leave his wife. He never did. Left her with a baby and vague promises that faded fast. "I'll be okay, Mom," Polly said quietly. "Please don't worry." Outside, the rain had turned into a full downpour. Polly decided not to go anywhere today. She'd stay home, watch a movie, try not to think about Martin laughing with colleagues at some country house, playing the perfect husband. And his wife, still a mystery to Polly. All she knew was that she used to be a schoolteacher and had a sickly-looking son. The doorbell made her jump. Could it be Martin, she thought, a flicker of hope sparking, then quickly fading. He would have called first. At the door stood a courier holding a bouquet of white roses. "Polly Langford. Delivery for you." Attached was a small card. "Saw you yesterday, but you rushed right past me. Remember your loyal admirer from third year? Dinner sometime? Ed." Polly stared at the flowers, startled. Ed Lawrence. Of course she remembered him, the class president of the neighboring group, always in every college theater production, in love with her for all 5 years. She had passed him yesterday at the business center during a client meeting, nodded in passing, too rushed to stop. And now he had tracked down her contact info and sent her flowers. Something stirred inside her, a longing for something simple, honest. A relationship with no secrets, no lies, no hiding. One where she could just go to the movies hand in hand, meet each other's parents, make real plans. What if, she thought. But she pushed the thought away. No. I love Martin. We'll be together. He promised. I just have to wait a little longer. Still, staring at the white roses, a sharp truth hit her, she didn't have that much time. And every year she spent waiting was a year she would never get back. That same Saturday, in a completely different world, Veronica Pierce sat in front of a mirror at the Eden Beauty Salon. A young stylist was working her magic on Veronica's hair, which for the past few years had been tied back in a practical bun or ponytail. "I think a shoulder-length layered cut would look great on you," the girl said, wrapping a strand around her comb. "You've got such a lovely face shape, and this would really bring it out. Maybe a bit of soft highlighting for volume." Veronica nodded, studying her reflection in the mirror. When was the last time she had truly looked at herself? Not a passing glance to check if everything was in place, but really looked, with curiosity and attention. Fine lines around her eyes, a hint of tiredness in her gaze, but the eyes were the same. Gray, with golden flecks Martin once called stardust. She hadn't come to the salon out of vanity or to impress her husband. This was her first step toward reclaiming herself. The Veronica who once devoured books, argued passionately about Silver Age symbolism, and dreamed of writing a book about female characters in literature. The Veronica who had slowly dissolved into motherhood, housework, and the comfortable but identity-erasing role of the successful man's wife. After the salon, she went to the mall. She wandered through stores for 2 hours, trying on clothes, comparing styles, searching for one that felt like her, not the practical, understated style she had settled into during motherhood, but one that reflected her inner self. She left with a few dresses, simple but elegant, a couple of blouses with interesting cuts, and a pair of low-heeled shoes. Back home, she went through her closet and ruthlessly packed up everything that represented her bold, convenient life. It all went to a charity donation pile. That evening, after Charlie had gone to bed and Martin was still out at yet another meeting, she pulled down a box from the top shelf, books that once thrilled her. Never talk to strangers, she read the first line and smirked. It had been so long since she'd spoken to her true self, the one buried under layers of daily duties. Martin came home late and stopped in the doorway of the living room, staring at her. She was sitting with a book in her lap, her hair newly styled, wearing an elegant house dress instead of her usual robe. "Veronica," he said, genuinely surprised. "What's going on with you?" "Just felt like freshening up a little," she shrugged, keeping her tone casual. "Do you like it?" He stepped closer, studying her like he was seeing her for the first time. "I do," he said finally. "You look amazing." There was something complex in his eyes, a mix of admiration and caution. Like her transformation not only attracted him, but unsettled him. "Thanks," she smiled and turned a page in her book deliberately. The next morning, while packing for their weekend trip to Christopher Richardson's estate, she added casually, "Oh, by the way, I signed up for psychology courses at the Personal Development Center. 3 evenings a week after work." "Psychology?" Martin raised his eyebrows. "Why?" "Charlie's going to be a teenager soon. I want to understand what he'll be going through, how to support him during that stage." She carefully folded her new sea green dress into the suitcase. "Besides, I'm genuinely interested. I've always loved learning." It was partly true. The courses could definitely help her connect with her son. But her deeper goal was more personal, to understand herself better, sort through her emotions, and maybe even prepare for a new career. Something that would give her independence if she ever had to start over. The weekend trip to the deputy CEO's estate turned out to be a personal triumph for Veronica. Christopher, a refined man with old-school charm, was a fan of classic literature. His wife, Jacqueline, collected porcelain and could talk about anything with grace. The Haywoods, a well-traveled couple, shared stories from around the world. It was like Veronica had woken up from a long sleep. She joined the conversations with passion, discussing art, modern architecture, psychology. She quoted her favorite poets, shared funny anecdotes from her teaching days. Her long-buried inner world came bursting to the surface, vivid, alive, full of color and depth. Charlie, watching his mother in admiration, leaned over during dinner and whispered, "Mom, you're so cool. Everyone's listening to you, even Christopher." "And Martin?" He looked at his wife with an expression she hadn't seen in years, a mix of surprise and guilt, as if, for the first time, he was realizing just how close he'd come to losing her. That evening, back in the guest room of the cottage, he reached for her, for the first time in a long time. Gently, hesitantly, like he used to in the early years of their marriage. "You were amazing today," he said, kissing her neck. "Everyone was so impressed with you." Veronica closed her eyes, torn between conflicting emotions, the instinct to respond to his touch, the bitterness of knowing the truth behind his double life, and a strange satisfaction that her plan was working. In the end, she allowed herself to sink into the moment, not for him, but for herself. It wasn't surrender, it was another step in reclaiming the woman she'd buried beneath motherhood and housework. Her femininity, her self-worth, her confidence. The next morning, Christopher pulled Martin aside for a private conversation. When it was time to leave, their hosts bid them farewell warmly, with open invitations to return. "What did you two talk about?" Veronica asked casually on the drive home. "He offered me a new project," Martin said, unable to hide the pleased grin on his face. "It's a big step up. And you know what else? He said I have a very smart, well-educated wife. Apparently, that kind of thing matters in their circle." Veronica stayed silent, staring out the window at the trees blurring past. His words echoed strangely inside her. So that's what she was, a valuable asset to his image. A polished accessory. But the part of her that had been quietly, coldly playing her chess match made a note, another successful move. A week later, while checking the intercepted emails, Veronica found a message from Polly to Martin. Attached was a full business plan for a new marketing agency Polly wanted to launch, along with a request for significant financial backing to cover startup costs. "This is our project, Martin," Polly wrote. "I'll handle operations, you'll oversee finances and strategy. It's our chance to build something of our own, together." Veronica read the message several times. This wasn't just an affair anymore. These were shared plans. A future. A life and business together. Far more serious than she had assumed. The next morning, the family car suddenly broke down, some mysterious electrical issue that would require an expensive repair. Then, a day later, Charlie's homeroom teacher called, expressing concern about his increased anxiety and withdrawal, and strongly recommended a consultation with a psychologist, one who worked at a high-end private clinic. "I'm sorry, but we'll have to hold off on any big expenses for now," Veronica told Martin over dinner. "With the car and Charlie's therapy, finances are tight. Maybe in a couple of months things will ease up." She saw the tension in Martin's shoulders, but he couldn't argue, nothing ever came before their son's well-being. The next day, Martin texted Polly to say they'd have to postpone funding the agency due to unexpected family expenses. That evening, Veronica met Melanie at their favorite cafe. "So?" Melanie asked, stirring her coffee. "Is the plan working?" "It is," Veronica sighed. "But sometimes I wonder. I mean, this is manipulation. I'm moving people around like chess pieces. And he didn't manipulate you for years?" Melanie shot back. "Didn't lie to you? Cheat on you? That doesn't make what I'm doing right," Veronica said quietly. "Sometimes I worry I'm turning into someone I won't be able to respect." "You're protecting your family," Melanie said, placing a hand over hers. "And yourself. You have every right to do that." Still, the doubts lingered. To cope with the tension building inside her, Veronica started running in the mornings, first forcing herself, then growing to enjoy it. She signed up for swimming lessons. The physical activity helped clear her mind, calm her nerves, and slowly, steadily, made her feel stronger, not just emotionally, but physically too. Day by day, Veronica noticed changes in herself, her posture straighter, her gaze more focused, her voice clearer. It was as if a new woman was slowly emerging from the cocoon of a timid housewife, a woman who was strong, self-aware, and no longer willing to fade into the background. And everyone noticed it, her neighbors, her mother, her son. And of course, Martin, who now looked at his wife with a kind of quiet curiosity, as if trying to solve a riddle he hadn't even known existed. Meanwhile, across town, Polly Langford received a message from Ed Lawrence inviting her to a concert of her favorite band. And for the first time in a long while, she thought, why not? Two women. Two parallel lives, tied together by an invisible thread. One was trying to reclaim what she believed was hers. The other was beginning to wonder if what she was holding on to had ever truly belonged to her. And both, without knowing it, were moving toward a moment where their paths would cross in the most unexpected way. Trouble came suddenly, the way real trouble always does, without warning, without giving you time to prepare or gather strength. Veronica was just leaving her evening psychology class when her phone rang sharply. "Veronica?" It was Charlie's homeroom teacher, her voice tense. "You need to come to the school immediately." Charlie collapsed during PE. He lost consciousness. "We've called an ambulance." The world shrank to the size of the phone gripped in her freezing hands. Fear, primal, instinctive, maternal, washed over her like a wave. "I'm on my way," she breathed and ran to the nearest taxi stand. At the school, she was met by the pale-faced teacher and the school nurse, who was taking Charlie's blood pressure as he lay on the infirmary cot. He was deathly pale, sweat clinging to his forehead, and his breathing was shallow, wheezing. "Asthma attack," the nurse said. "But it's not typical, he lost consciousness. He needs to be hospitalized and thoroughly examined." "The ambulance should be here soon," the teacher added. "We called over 20 minutes ago." Veronica dropped to her knees beside her son and wrapped his warm, limp hand in hers. "Charlie, sweetheart, I'm here," she whispered. "It's going to be okay. Just hang on." He cracked his eyes open, clouded, pupils dilated. "Mama, it's hard," each word cost him effort. "I know, love, I know. Help is coming soon." She ran her fingers through his sweat-damp hair, panic rising with every labored breath he took. With her free hand, Veronica pulled out her phone and dialed her husband. Ring after ring, then voicemail. Again. And again. Nothing. "Where are you when we need you the most?" All the pain of the past weeks crystallized in that one thought. Then she remembered, she could check his location through the tracking app. She opened it. Bellagio restaurant, downtown. The same one where, according to the messages, he often met Polly. Just then, a breathless security guard stepped into the infirmary. "Ambulance is stuck in traffic on the main road. Big accident. They said it'll be another 40 minutes, at least." Panic clutched her throat. 40 minutes. Charlie's lips were turning blue. His breaths were growing more strained. "Does anyone have a car?" she asked, nurse, teacher, guard. All shook their heads. "I can drive you," said a voice from the doorway. Veronica turned. William stood there, slightly disheveled in his old trench coat. "I brought my grandson for the math competition," he explained. "Heard about what happened. My car's out front. We'll get there faster than an ambulance." Without hesitation, Veronica nodded. William helped carry Charlie into the car, old, but clean. The whole way to the hospital, she held her son across her lap, counting each ragged breath as if willing him to keep going. "Did you reach your husband?" William asked as he weaved through traffic. "He's not answering," she said shortly, not explaining further. The old man nodded knowingly and said no more. At the Children's Hospital ER, Charlie was rushed into intensive care. Veronica was left alone in the cold hallway, clutching his backpack full of clean clothes. Waves of fear gave way to moments of eerie stillness. William stayed nearby, sometimes disappearing to bring her tea from the vending machine. His quiet presence calmed her, a reminder of the kind of support that used to come from neighbors, family, even strangers. "He's going to be okay," the old man said gently. "I've seen plenty of sick boys in my life, yours is tough, with a fighter's spirit. He'll pull through." Veronica nodded, unable to speak. In her mind, she didn't see Charlie pale and gasping on the infirmary cot, she saw him as a newborn, a tiny bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket. Her miracle, her salvation after all those years of waiting. Could fate really be so cruel as to take him away now? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Finally, Martin. "Veronica? What happened? I have 10 missed calls." He sounded alarmed, but she could also hear other things in his voice, guilt, urgency, the hum of a restaurant in the background. "Charlie's in the hospital," she said flatly. "Asthma attack. He lost consciousness. He's in intensive care." Silence on the other end. Then the sound of movement, rustling bills. He was paying the check. And finally, "I'm on my way. I'll be there in half an hour." Martin arrived 40 minutes later, disheveled, collar unbuttoned, worry etched into his face. He froze when he saw Veronica sitting with an older man he didn't recognize. "This is William, our neighbor," Veronica explained. "He drove us here when the ambulance got stuck in traffic." Martin extended his hand. "Thank you so much. I don't even know how to thank you." "No need," William said as he stood. "You're here now, that's what matters. I should go, my grandson's probably wondering where I am. Tell Charlie I wish him a speedy recovery." Once he was gone, Martin sank into the chair beside her. He smelled of expensive cologne, and a trace of unfamiliar perfume. "What did the doctor say?" he asked, avoiding her gaze. "Nothing definite yet. They're running tests, gave him oxygen and fluids," Veronica replied, keeping her voice steady. "We're waiting on results. I was at an important meeting, left my phone in my jacket, didn't hear it," Martin began to explain. "It doesn't matter," she cut him off. "What matters is Charlie." A doctor appeared, a young man with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much pain in children. "Parents of Charlie Pierce. We've stabilized his condition. It was a severe attack, but he's no longer in danger. We're moving him to the intensive care unit. One of you can stay overnight." "I'll stay," they both said at once, then looked at each other in surprise. "You can both stay with him for a while," the doctor offered gently. "But only one can remain overnight, hospital policy." Charlie was moved to a small room with 2 beds, one of them empty. He slept, hooked up to N4 and oxygen, but his breathing was calmer now, and the color was returning to his face. Veronica and Martin sat on either side of his bed, not looking at each other, focused on the quiet rhythm of their son's breath. "Do you remember the day he was born?" Veronica asked softly, eyes still on their boy. Martin nodded. "He was so small, I was afraid to hold him," he said, and there was tenderness in his voice, something she hadn't heard in years. "But you picked him up right away, held him close, and he calmed down instantly." "I was terrified of losing him," Veronica whispered. "The whole pregnancy. That first year, I'd wake up every night just to check if he was still breathing." "You were always stronger than me," Martin said unexpectedly. "Back then, I didn't understand what it was like for you. All those years of waiting, the hospitals." Veronica turned to look at him, really look, for the first time that evening. His face was drawn, new lines by his eyes, more gray at his temples. The man she'd spent nearly 20 years with. The father of her son. A stranger, and yet, still familiar. "We made it," she said quietly. "We brought him into this world. We raised him." They talked late into the night, quietly, sitting in the dim light of the hospital room, listening to the steady breathing of their sleeping son. They talked about Charlie, his success in chess, their hopes for his future, their fears for his health. About their youth, the early days of their marriage, how they had changed over the years. When the nurse peeked in to say it was almost time for one of them to leave, Martin unexpectedly took Veronica's hand, just like he used to when they walked home from the ice rink, frozen and happy. His hand was warm and steady. "You stay," he said. "I'll come back in the morning with breakfast and some clothes." And for the first time in a long while, Veronica believed he actually meant it. Charlie spent 3 days in the hospital. The diagnosis was serious, but manageable, common asthma, requiring daily medication and a careful routine. People live full lives with this, the doctor told them. The key is to stay on top of the meds and watch his health closely. Martin was there the whole time, arriving each morning with breakfast, staying until late evening, speaking with doctors, joking with Charlie, supporting Veronica. It was like the old Martin had returned, the one she had once fallen in love with. Attentive. Present. Steady. Back home, they settled into a new routine, medication schedules, a special diet for Charlie, regular doctor visits. It felt like the early years of his life again, when every day was filled with both worry and hope. And yet, something between them had changed. There was more warmth now, less distance. As if the wall that had built up over the years had finally cracked. But then Martin started staying late at work again. Skipping dinners. One evening, Veronica checked his location. He was at that same restaurant. The one where he'd met Polly the day Charlie had his attack. That night, she checked his messages. There it was. Polly, we need to meet. I have important news. This isn't something I can say over the phone. Veronica's heart skipped a beat. Important news? What could it mean? Pregnancy? An ultimatum? Whatever it was, it couldn't be good for her family. She lay awake that night, listening to Martin's breathing beside her. This couldn't go on. They were stuck, trapped in a cycle with no way forward. She hadn't fought all these weeks just to give up now. The next morning, while reviewing Charlie's school portal, she spotted an announcement about the upcoming city chess tournament. Her son had always dreamed of being on the main team, but the coach had always favored more experienced players. This is my chance, Veronica thought, and immediately felt a pang of guilt. She was about to use her son in her own game. That afternoon, she went to the school and asked to meet with the chess coach, Leonard Clark, a lean, sharp-eyed man with perpetually messy hair. After everything Charlie's been through, this could really lift his spirits, she told him, meeting his gaze. A win would mean the world right now. I know there are stronger players, but maybe just one match. Leonard tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. He actually has been improving lately. He's got a good grasp on strategy. He flipped through the training log. All right. I'll put him on second board in round 2. Let's see how he does. When Veronica got home, the first thing she did was tell Charlie the news. His face lit up, eyes wide with that unmistakable spark he only got when talking about chess. Really? I get to play? For real? Not just as backup. He was ecstatic. Dad has to come watch. Of course, Veronica smiled, though she felt a twinge of guilt. I'll make sure he knows. That evening, when Martin came home, she brought it up casually. Charlie's playing in the city tournament this Saturday. Can you believe it? The coach finally put him on the main team. Saturday? Martin frowned. I have an important meeting. He really wants you there, Veronica said, locking eyes with him. After the hospital, he's more sensitive now. You know how much your support means to him. Martin looked away. She could see him struggling with the decision. You know, she added, her tone light but deliberate, if you can't make it, I can ask Leonard to sit with him. They've gotten pretty close lately. Almost like a second father. That one sentence, spoken without pressure but with a subtle undertone, hit its mark. Veronica saw it flash in Martin's eyes, not just guilt, but something deeper. Fear. Fear of losing his place in his son's heart, of being replaced. No, I'll be there, Martin said firmly. I promise. Saturday came crisp and sunny. Veronica and Charlie arrived early at the chess club. He was excited, but focused, whispering opening moves to himself like a mantra. Dad's coming, right? He asked for the 10th time, eyes scanning the entrance. He promised, Veronica said carefully, though her stomach was tight with anxiety. The first round had already begun. Charlie was scheduled for the second, an hour and a half later. Still no Martin. Veronica knew Polly was waiting for him across town in a cafe, with those important news. The choice he made today would shape the future of their family. Time dragged on painfully. Veronica smiled automatically at other parents, answered the coach's questions, but inside she felt like a wire stretched to the breaking point. 10 minutes before the second round began and still no sign of Martin, Charlie approached her with his head down. "He's not coming, is he?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with an adult kind of resignation that stabbed at Veronica's heart. She began, but just then the doors burst open, and Martin rushed in, breathless, hair tousled, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Dad!" Charlie ran to him, forgetting any pretense of teenage coolness. Martin hugged his son tightly, then turned to Veronica and handed her the flowers with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry. Traffic. I nearly lost my mind trying to get here." There was so much in his eyes, guilt, relief, something newly resolute, that Veronica was momentarily speechless. She simply nodded, took the flowers, and felt a strange warmth blooming inside her. The second round began. Charlie, lifted by his father's presence, played with fire and confidence. His opponent, an older boy, decorated with medals from past tournaments, started with a smug grin that gradually gave way to deep concentration, frustration, and finally, defeat. Veronica and Martin stood side by side, not touching, but closer than they'd been in months. They held their breath with every move. "He's winning," Martin whispered as Charlie set up a brilliant position. "Look at this. That move he just made, it's brilliant." And a few minutes later, Charlie's opponent tipped over his king in silent surrender. That evening, they celebrated at home, nothing fancy, but filled with a kind of unity they hadn't felt in a long time. Charlie, glowing with pride, excitedly recounted his strategy, his opponent's mistakes, and plans for upcoming matches. Martin listened with genuine interest, asked questions, promised he'd be there for every round next time. After their son finally went to bed, tired but beaming, Veronica and Martin remained in the kitchen, just the two of them. A silence hung between them. "Thank you for coming today," Veronica said at last. "It meant a lot to him. And to me." Martin nodded, staring into his mug of tea like it might hold all the answers he couldn't find. "I had to," he said simply. "He's my son. You're my family." And in those words, Veronica heard more than a statement of fact. She heard a choice. A decision. A turning point. Later that night, after Martin went to shower, she acted on a sudden impulse and checked his phone. One new message from Polly, sent hours earlier. "I can't do this anymore. It's over." Veronica slowly set the phone back down. What she felt wasn't triumph, but a calm, quiet sadness. Human relationships were fragile things. So easy to break. So hard to rebuild. "But we'll try," she thought, looking at the family photo on the wall, just the three of them, smiling, sun-kissed, real. The match was won. But at what cost? And was it truly the end of the game, or just the beginning of something far more complicated? In a small apartment on the city's edge, Polly was packing a suitcase, methodically, precisely, like everything else she did. Every motion practiced and controlled. Blouses with blouses, pants with pants, tissue paper between layers to keep them smooth. Professional habits, organize, structure, stay in control. But inside, nothing felt orderly. Inside, there was only chaos, a storm of emotions she couldn't name, couldn't stop, couldn't make sense of. She took the handwritten letter out of the desk drawer. Old-fashioned, maybe even a little dramatic, writing a letter in the age of emails and messaging apps. But some things demand form. A ritual. A proper goodbye. "Dear Martin," the letter began, one she had read at least 10 times by now. "By the time you get this, I'll already be on the train to New York. No, don't try to find me, don't call me, this really is the end. Not because I don't love you. But because I've finally learned to love myself enough to stop living the way I've lived these past 3 years. 3 years. 1,095 days spent in limbo, clinging to the sweet illusion that things would change. That one day your promises would become reality. I don't blame you, the letter continued. You never promised to leave your family. You never gave me timelines. I created that story myself. I convinced myself this was more than just an affair. For 3 years, I said no to other opportunities, turned away from new relationships, passed up career moves. I lived half a life, in secret, in the shadow of your real one. Polly set the letter down and walked to the window. Outside was the same bland building across the street, a gray fence around a construction site, the occasional pedestrian rushing by. It felt like a metaphor for her life with Martin, no view, no space, no color. They say people accept the kind of love they believe they deserve. Maybe she had never really believed she deserved more. A girl from a broken home, raised by a mother always too tired from holding everything together, where was she supposed to learn her worth? But something had shifted in her in recent weeks. Something deep inside, like a tectonic plate that had finally begun to move. Maybe it started when that lake weekend was cancelled, just another broken plan in a long line of disappointments. Or the unanswered calls the day she waited for him in that cafe with big news, calls he ignored because he chose to be at his son's chess tournament. Or maybe it was seeing Ed again, that old classmate who looked at her with such honest admiration, such real interest. I'm moving to New York. A friend found me a position at a solid agency. I gave my notice a week ago, Christopher Richardson already signed off. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I've always been good at handling things on my own. New York is a city of possibilities. A fresh start. Scary? Absolutely. I'm 30, not 17, and starting over is never easy. But I'd rather take a hard leap now than keep fading in a relationship that's going nowhere. Her phone rang, it was her mother. Polly took a deep breath before picking up. Hi, Mom. So, you're all packed. Roberta's voice was a mix of worry and pride. Did you double-check your ticket? Got your umbrella? They're saying it'll rain in New York. I've got everything, Mom, Polly said, unable to stop the smile. She was 30, setting out to build a new life, but to her mother, she'd always be the little girl who needed reminders about the weather. You sound sad, her mother noted, sharper than she let on. Is this about that man? The married one? Polly flinched. She'd never told her mother about Martin, but Roberta, for all her simplicity, had a sixth sense about these things. No, Mom, she lied. Just nervous about the move. Her mother hummed, clearly unconvinced. Just be careful, sweetheart. Don't make my mistakes. Married men don't leave their wives. And if they do, it's never for long, and always with one eye looking back. After the call, Polly sat back down at the desk and finished the letter with a few final lines. I don't hold anything against you. Truly. You gave me moments I'll always be grateful for. But I need a whole life, not just pieces of someone else's. Goodbye. Don't look for me. Polly. She sealed the envelope, wrote Martin's office address on it, and handed it to the courier. He'd receive it tomorrow, by the time she'd already be on the train. Martin Pierce sat at his desk in the spacious Urban Access office, absent-mindedly flipping through the quarterly report, not really seeing the numbers. His thoughts were miles away, at the chess tournament 2 days ago, where his son had earned his first real victory, and where Martin himself had finally made the decision he'd been putting off for months. Polly hadn't answered his calls since yesterday. She hadn't shown up at work, hadn't responded to any messages. At first, he was angry. They were supposed to meet for a serious talk, and he'd planned to finally end it, to explain that their relationship was over. But she had simply vanished. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Martin, you have a letter, his assistant said, placing a plain white envelope on his desk, his name written in a familiar, slightly slanted hand. He waited until she'd left before opening it. As he read, a strange mix of emotions washed over him: shock, disbelief, a sharp sense of loss, and, unexpectedly, relief. Yes, above all, it was relief that settled in his chest. He read the letter 3 times, as if searching between the lines for some hidden message, some subtle hint that it wasn't final, that there was still something to fix, to hold on to. But the more he read, the clearer it became: Polly was gone. And what surprised him most was that part of him, deep, honest, quiet, was grateful. For 3 years, he had lived a double life, a husband and father in one world, a passionate lover in another. 3 years of walking the tightrope between duty and desire, responsibility and selfishness. 3 years of lies, to Polly, to Veronica, and most of all, to himself. And in the end, it was Polly who made the decision for him. Freed him. Chose what he'd been too afraid to choose. Martin folded the letter and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He glanced at the clock: 3 p.m. Too early to go home, by his usual schedule. But today, he suddenly needed to see his son. To talk to Veronica. To feel like part of the family he'd nearly destroyed with his own weakness. "Stacy," he said, stepping out of his office, "cancel the rest of my meetings for the day. I need to leave, family matter." At home, he was met with an unexpected sight: Veronica and Charlie in the kitchen, making pizza together, laughing, both covered in flour. It was such a simple scene, but it struck Martin with its warmth and authenticity. That kind of comfort couldn't be bought. "Dad!" Charlie beamed when he saw him. "We're making pizza. Want to help?" "You're home early," Veronica noted, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Martin said, taking off his jacket. "I just wanted to be with you too." That evening passed in a kind of warmth they hadn't felt in ages. They ate homemade pizza, played a board game, and later Martin helped Charlie with his math homework while Veronica sat on the couch reading, occasionally glancing at them with a new expression: thoughtful, watchful. Later, after Charlie had gone to bed and they were left alone in the kitchen, Martin felt the urge to explain himself, to say something. "Veronica, he began, then faltered. He didn't know how to say it. What could he possibly offer? "Sorry I cheated for 3 years. My mistress left me and now I realize what I had." Any words felt hollow, insulting in their incompleteness. "You don't have to," Veronica said quietly, looking him in the eye. "Let's just try. One day at a time." And in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't expected: not blind forgiveness, not naive hopefulness, but a calm, measured acceptance of reality, cracks and all. The next day, Veronica stood by the living room window, watching Martin and Charlie in the yard. They were fixing an old bike together. From a distance, they looked like any happy family, father and son focused on a shared task, laughing, talking. A strange feeling filled her, a mix of quiet satisfaction and an emptiness that follows a long battle, when the tension fades and all that's left is the question: what now? Over the past 2 weeks, Martin had changed noticeably. He spent more time at home, took interest in Charlie's schoolwork, even started helping around the house. No more late nights at the office. No mysterious weekend meetings. Polly was gone from his life. Veronica had confirmed it by checking his messages and seeing Polly's latest posts from New York. "I won," she thought. But the thought brought no triumph. Just a soft sadness, tangled with uncertainty. That evening, she met Melanie at their favorite cafe. Her friend listened closely as Veronica told her everything that had happened. "So, your plan worked," Melanie said thoughtfully, stirring her coffee. "The other woman is out, the husband's back. Sounds like a happy ending, straight out of a romance novel." "Don't be sarcastic," Veronica winced. "I don't even know how I feel. I got what I wanted, and yet." "But something's off," Melanie finished for her. "Because you're not stupid, Veronica. And you know this: you won the battle, but the war for his loyalty? That's never ending. Today it was Polly. Tomorrow it could be someone else. You don't think he's changed? Veronica asked quietly. Melanie shrugged. People don't change that easily. But this isn't even about him anymore. It's about you, she said, looking Veronica straight in the eye. Can you live with him now? Can you trust him? Stop checking his phone. Not jump every time he gets a call late at night. Stop looking for hidden meanings in everything he says. Veronica said nothing, letting the question settle in her mind. Could she? 3 months ago, she thought she could, for the sake of the family, for Charlie, for the life they'd built. But now, with the goal reached, that confidence was starting to fade. When she got home, she found William on the front step. He looked a little uncomfortable, nervously fiddling with his worn felt hat. Sorry for the late visit, Veronica, he said. I just wanted to see how Charlie's doing. Haven't seen him since the hospital. He's doing well, thank you, Veronica smiled. Would you like to come in for some tea? In the kitchen, the usually reserved old man seemed transformed. He talked more than usual, about his late wife, about his sons who rarely visited. You know, Veronica, he said finally, as the conversation turned to family, last time we spoke, I didn't tell you everything about my marriage. He paused, his voice a little heavier. I told you Francis and I had a good life after my affair. And it's true. But, it's not the whole truth. He fell silent again, gathering his thoughts. She stayed with me, yes. She forgave me, at least with words. But something inside her broke. She withdrew, became distant. We lived together, but not really together. We shared a home, children, responsibilities, but not ourselves. It took me a long time to understand. I thought that was just how she was. And then, I got used to it. I accepted it. He took a sip of tea, eyes staring somewhere beyond Veronica, lost in memories. Right before she passed, when she was already in the hospital, Francis told me, William, I've spent my whole life regretting that I didn't have the courage to start over. That I was too afraid to be alone, without support. Maybe if I had, I could have been truly happy. Can you imagine? Living with that thought for 40 years. Veronica felt something tighten inside her. 40 years of quiet despair, of silent surrender, of a marriage that had become just a shell, no trust, no closeness, no joy. Why are you telling me this, William? She asked, though deep down, she already knew. Because I see the same doubt in your eyes that I saw in Francis's, he said simply. And I don't want to see another good woman spend her life regretting the choice she was too afraid to make. After he left, Veronica sat still for a long time, cradling her cooling cup of tea in both hands. His words had touched something deep inside her, something she hadn't realized was there. Did she truly want to save her marriage? Or was she just afraid? Afraid of change, of being alone, of starting over at 40, of raising her son without a father? Afraid to admit that maybe 18 years of marriage had led to a dead end, and the only way out was to turn around and find a new path? For months, she'd been so focused on the fight, on strategy, on tactics, on getting Martin back, that she'd never stopped to ask the most important question, did she even want him back? Not for Charlie, not for the sake of keeping up the image of a family, but for herself. For her own happiness. The next day, after her psychology course, Veronica found Charlie in the living room. He was sitting over the chessboard, frowning at the pieces. Lost again, she guessed, taking a seat beside him. Charlie nodded, biting his lip. Barry Stewart. Again. Third time this month, he muttered in frustration. I'll never beat him. He's just better than me. Maybe, Veronica said calmly. Or maybe he just has more experience. Or a different way of thinking. That doesn't make you worse, just different. But I want to win, Charlie burst out, suddenly emotional. What's the point if I can't win? Veronica thought for a moment, choosing her words carefully. You know, when I was 9, I really wanted to get into music school, she began. I practiced with a neighbor who played piano. I was so nervous during the audition that I messed everything up. They didn't accept me. What did you do? Charlie asked, intrigued. I cried for a week, Veronica admitted with a smile. Then I went to the library. Just to pass time. Picked up a book, then another, and suddenly I found a whole world of stories. If I'd gotten into music school, I might have missed that. Charlie stared thoughtfully at the board. So if I don't become a great chess player, it's not the end of the world, he asked with a grin. Definitely not, Veronica said, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. You might become a great mathematician. Or a doctor. Or an astronaut. Or just a happy person, which, trust me, is more important than any title. He fell silent for a moment, seeming to let that sink in. Then, suddenly, he asked. Mom, have you ever regretted a decision? I mean, have you ever thought, what if I'd done something different? The question caught Veronica off guard, so simple, yet so profound. She could have answered with something vague, some ready-made parent line like, everything happens for a reason. But there was something in Charlie's eyes, an earnestness, a seriousness beyond his age, that called for the truth. Yes, she said softly. I have. And I've wondered, what if? Everyone does, Charlie. Life rarely follows the exact script we imagine. So how do you know if you've made the right choice? He looked at her with such trust, it made her chest ache. You don't, she said honestly. All you can do is listen to yourself and ask, does this choice make me happier? Stronger? Freer? And if the answer is yes, even to just one of those questions, then maybe you're on the right path. That evening, after putting her son to bed, Veronica stood by the window for a long time, staring at the city lights. Somewhere out there, beyond the flickering glow, Polly was building a new life, a young woman who'd found the strength to break the cycle and start over. Somewhere out there was Melanie, raising her daughter on her own, but free and true to herself. And somewhere out there rested Frances, who had spent a lifetime mourning a choice she never made. And who am I? Veronica asked herself. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't know the answer. Her psychology course certificate lay on the desk, its embossed letters catching the light. Veronica ran her fingers across it, feeling the textured paper like it was something alive, something real. A future beginning to take shape out of the fog of uncertainty. 6 months of intense study, sleepless nights, notebooks full of scribbles, tests, training sessions. What started as a way to understand her husband and his motives had quietly turned into something else, a journey toward herself. Psychology hadn't just revealed the workings of human behavior, it had opened the doors to her own soul, those hidden rooms she hadn't dared to enter in years. A phone call broke her thoughts. Congrats, top student, Melanie's voice came through warmly, with a hint of mischief. So, how was your final presentation? I heard Parkin himself offered you an internship at his center. He did, Veronica couldn't hide her smile. 3 days a week, private practice as a family counselor. He said I have a unique perspective on family dynamics. No kidding, Melanie chuckled. With your experience? You're practically a case study. So what does Martin think? Veronica hesitated, choosing her words. He supports it. At least, that's what he says. The truth was more complicated. When she told Martin about the offer, there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, and something else, too. Something close to unease. Are you sure this is what you want? He'd asked. And in that moment, Veronica realized, he was afraid. Afraid of her independence. Of the changes already happening within her, and between them. Either way, Melanie continued, I'm proud of you. You're different now, Veronica. Like you finally woke up from a long sleep. Woke up, that was exactly it. Veronica felt like someone who'd been asleep for years and was just now seeing the world in color, hearing its sounds again, sensing the newness of what could be. Her first client appeared unexpectedly. A mother of one of Charlie's classmates, who'd heard through a teacher about Veronica's new work. Divorced, 2 kids, struggling with her ex, an ordinary story, one repeated in countless homes. But sitting across from this tired woman with empty eyes and a trembling voice, Veronica felt something strange and powerful, a kinship, a connection. "I know what you're feeling," she wanted to say. "I've been there, too. At the crossroads. In the dark. Not knowing which way to turn." After the session, Veronica stood at the window, watching people rush by, each carrying their own invisible burdens, pain, fear, hope. And then it hit her, this was her purpose. Not just a job. Not just a way to fill her time or earn money. But a chance to turn her own wounds, her own hard-earned lessons, into something useful. Something healing. Weeks passed, and her practice began to grow. Women from all walks of life, different ages, backgrounds, but all with stories that echoed one another: betrayal, disappointment, the search for self. And for each of them, Veronica found the right words, the right way in. Not just from her studies, but from a deeper place, one no textbook could ever reach. Things were changing at home, too. Martin, as if trying to make up for an unspoken guilt, spent more time with the family. He turned down business trips, brought home surprise gifts, small, thoughtful, without occasion, like he used to in the early days of their marriage. One afternoon, Veronica overheard him on the phone with a colleague. "No, I can't go. Family stuff," Martin said firmly. "Let's send Mitchell instead, it'll be good experience for him." "No, I mean it. I've got things here that matter more." Something shifted in Veronica's chest. He was truly trying. Trying to become the man he nearly lost the right to be. But oddly enough, the same gestures that would have thrilled her just 3 months ago now stirred only a calm gratitude, no butterflies, no desperate hope. There was a quiet space between them now, not distance out of bitterness, but room to breathe, to think. Veronica no longer dissolved into her husband's world, his moods, his routines. She watched him from a distance, evaluated, decided what parts of him still had a place in her life, and what didn't. One evening, with Charlie sleeping over at a friend's house, she finally brought up the conversation she'd been putting off for months. "Martin, we need to talk," she said as they sat in the living room with cups of tea. "About us. About our relationship." He stiffened and set his cup down. "Is something wrong?" "A lot has happened," Veronica said calmly. "In the last 6 months, we've both changed. Have you noticed?" Martin nodded, his gaze steady on hers. "You're different," he said after a pause. "More confident. Independent. And you've become more present," she said, offering a small smile. "More family-oriented. Why do you think that is?" She could see him searching for words, trying to walk the line between truth and what felt safe to say. "I realized I almost lost the most important thing in my life," he finally said. "When Charlie was in the hospital, when I saw you there, so strong, handling it all without me, something clicked. I was scared. Not just for him, for us. For our family." "And that's it?" Veronica asked quietly, meeting his eyes. Martin looked away. She saw the flush of shame rise in his face. "I haven't been the husband you deserve," he said after a long silence. "I haven't always been honest. I wasn't there when you needed me." He hadn't said the words outright, hadn't confessed to the affair, but this was as close as he could bring himself to come. Veronica didn't push. There was no need to extract a confession she already held in her hands. "I want to make you a proposal," she said instead. "A new agreement, for this family." "What kind of agreement?" He sat up straighter, ready for a sentence or a deal. "Honesty," she began, counting on her fingers. Openness. Respect for each other's space. Time together that's real, not just ticking boxes. And above all, no secrets. No lies. If something's wrong, we say it. We don't look for comfort in someone else. Martin sat silently, taking it in. I agree, he said finally. But, do you think you'll ever trust me again? The question hung in the air, raw, real, needing an equally honest answer. I don't know, Veronica admitted. Trust is like porcelain. If you break it, you can glue it back together, but the cracks will always show. It takes time. And it takes both of us wanting to try. They talked late into the night, really talked, in a way they probably never had in all their years of marriage. About the past, the present, the future. They shared their fears, hopes, dreams. And for the first time in a long while, Veronica felt something new forming between them, not the blind infatuation of youth, not the habit of a long marriage, but a conscious closeness between two grown people choosing to move forward together, scars and all. That spring, Veronica traveled to a professional conference on family psychology in San Francisco. During a break between sessions, she stepped into the hotel cafe for a coffee, and froze. Polly Langford. Even more striking than in her social media photos, dressed in a sharp business suit, chatting animatedly with a young man. They were leaning over a laptop, discussing something with focus, but their body language held more than professional interest. There was ease, warmth, something unmistakably personal. Veronica's first instinct was to turn around and slip away unnoticed. But something held her there, not malice, not curiosity, but a strange sense of connection. This woman, unknowingly, had unraveled Veronica's world, shattered her sense of stability, and forced her to confront truths she had avoided for years. And because of that, she had started down a new path. Polly laughed at something her companion said, and in that laugh there was no pretense, no bitterness, only genuine happiness. She's happy, Veronica thought. Truly happy. And to her own surprise, she felt no hate. No jealousy. Only a strange kind of gratitude, for the twist of fate that had changed all of their lives. Veronica didn't approach her. There was no reason. The past belonged in the past, and the horizon ahead was calling. On a warm weekend evening, Veronica sat with Charlie in the gazebo at their country house, while Martin worked the grill nearby, flipping burgers. Mom, I've decided what I want to be, Charlie said seriously. A neurosurgeon. Oh really? Veronica smiled, watching his focused expression. What about chess? Still a hobby, he shrugged. But after the hospital, I've been thinking a lot. I want to help people. Really help. She looked at him with a mix of tenderness and pride. When had he grown up so much? Become this thoughtful, driven young person? Just yesterday, it seemed, he was a little boy afraid of thunder, climbing into her bed during storms. You know that means you'll have to study really hard, right? She said. Especially biology and chemistry. I know. He nodded seriously. I already made a study plan for the next 2 years. And Dad said he'd hire tutors. He paused, twisting a strand of hair around his finger, just like his father used to do. Mom, are you happy? He asked suddenly, studying her. With your new job, with us. With everything. The question caught her off guard with its quiet depth. Was she happy? A year ago, she wouldn't have known how to answer. Back then, happiness had meant keeping the family together at any cost. Keeping Martin. Preserving appearances. But now backslash. Yes, she said, and was surprised at how true it sounded. I'm happy because I've found myself. I realized I can be more than just a wife and mother, I can be someone with my own goals, dreams, and purpose. That's what real happiness is, Charlie, being at peace with who you are. Charlie nodded thoughtfully, as if tucking that wisdom away for later. And you and Dad? Are you two okay? We're working on it, Veronica answered honestly. Relationships are like a garden, you know. You can't just plant roses and forget about them. You have to water them, pull weeds, care for them constantly. It's hard sometimes, but it's worth it. Veronica Pierce's office as a family counselor was small but warm. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, a few watercolor paintings on the walls, her own work, a hobby she'd picked up again after many years. I don't know how to move forward, said the woman sitting across from her. Young, beautiful, with eyes full of silent panic. I love him, but after the affair, everything's broken. Every time he's late, every time he doesn't answer his phone, I think, who is he with? I can't live like this. Veronica listened carefully, nodding, asking questions, professionally, yet with that rare kind of empathy that only comes from someone who's lived through something similar. You know, she said gently when the woman across from her fell silent, I can't tell you what to do. That decision has to be yours alone. But whatever you choose, whether it's to forgive, to leave, or to start over, one thing matters most, don't lose yourself in the process. What do you mean? The client asked, lifting tear-filled eyes to meet hers. Crisis is always an opportunity, Veronica said with a soft smile. An opportunity to look inward, to understand what you truly want, what you need, what you value. Ask yourself, what do I really want? Not from him, but from life, from yourself. That answer will show you the way. After the session, Veronica jotted down her notes, closed the office, and headed home. On the way, she stopped to pick up groceries for a special dinner. Today was a big day for Charlie. He had won the city chess tournament, something he'd dreamed of for months. At home, she was met with a surprise. Martin had come home early and was already setting the table, while Charlie buzzed around him, placing silverware with focused excitement. "Mom!" Charlie shouted as soon as he saw her. "I won. Can you believe it? I even beat Massey. Congratulations, champ." Veronica hugged her son, her heart swelling with pride. "I never doubted you for a second." Dinner was easy, warm, full of laughter. They talked about the tournament, summer plans, Veronica's growing list of clients, and Martin's latest project. Charlie shared his plans for the entrance exams to a specialized science school, the first step toward his dream of becoming a neurosurgeon. After dinner, once Charlie had gone to his room to call a friend, Veronica noticed Martin frowning at his phone. "Something wrong?" she asked, feeling a familiar tightness rise in her chest, an old reflex, a ghost from the past. Once, she would have said nothing. Would have waited, then secretly checked his phone, eaten up by doubt. But those days were over. "Strange call," Martin said, holding up his screen. "Unknown number. Third time today. Maybe a client? Or just spam?" Veronica offered. "Probably," he shrugged. "I'll check tomorrow." And in that simple exchange, there was more honesty, more real closeness, than they'd shared in years before everything fell apart. Later that night, with the house quiet, Veronica stepped out onto the balcony. The summer air was heavy with the scent of flowers, and stars shimmered in the dark sky, distant, unreachable, but dazzling. 1 year ago, she had stood on this same balcony, holding a phone that confirmed her husband's betrayal. Crushed, hopeless, unable to see a way forward. 1 year. Such a short stretch in the scale of the universe, and yet such a monumental journey for the human soul. Her marriage to Martin hadn't become perfect, but really, are any marriages perfect? What it had become was real. Full of effort, compromise, and daily work. Without lies, without pretending, without the constant fear of being abandoned. The most important thing Veronica had learned in the past year was this: the real victory wasn't winning her husband back or defeating the other woman. The real victory was finding herself, her voice, her strength. "I'm no longer directing someone else's life," she thought, looking up at the stars. "I'm the author of my own story. And whatever the next chapter holds, I'm ready to write it." The stars twinkled back, silent witnesses to thousands of human stories, thousands of transformations, thousands of new beginnings. And in their shimmering light, Veronica sensed a quiet affirmation, a promise: the best is still ahead. Fate isn't shaped by other people's hands, but by our own choices. Veronica's story is a journey, from losing herself to finding her strength, from clinging to the illusion of happiness to building something real, with herself, and with the world. And what about you, dear readers? What would you have done in Veronica's place? Was it worth fighting for her marriage, or would it have been better to let go of the past and start over? Maybe you've gone through something similar yourself and found your own path to healing. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to find the strength for their next step. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it with someone who might need it right now. Sometimes, just one story can light the way when everything around feels dark and uncertain. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more stories about real people, their choices, mistakes, and victories. Thank you for walking this difficult, but meaningful journey with our heroine. The path to yourself is the most important journey you'll ever take, and knowing there are hearts out there that understand, that's priceless.